Yep, let's go.
All right, well, GM everybody it's GM for me. I'm in Sydney, so it's 10 o'clock here, but GN to wherever you are in the world. Um, I was trying to come up with a name for this talk because it's a bit of an amalgamation of everything that I'm going through right now and kind of my trials and tribulations of building realms. So I called it Eternal Games, which will come to clear why I called it that, and it's persistence through on-chain gaming. Uh, I'm a LordOfAFew, loaf for a piece of bread. I'm a builder and core contributor of Bibliotheca DAO, and I'm building the Realms game at the moment. I like Cairo. I'm going to be talking about Bibliotheca DAO, what it is, how it works. I'm going to be talking about the Realms, NFTs, and the game, why Starknet, my current Cairo stack, why on-chain matters, and on-chain gameplay. Bibliotheca DAO is it's a development DAO, and we are building a massively multiplayer on-chain gaming ecosystem on Starknet. Heavily in progress right now, so we're not quite there yet. But anybody is welcome to join and contribute to it. Everything's open source from the get-go. For better or worse, it's a little bit of a minefield, some of the repos, because they probably could do with a lot better documentation. But anybody that's developed open source repo probably understands that. So yes, and the DAO is governed by the Realms NFTs right now, and we are heavy on-chain maxis. I think a lot of the other panelists are. So what are Realms? Realms are Creative Commons maps originated in the Lootverse, and they've really spawned a lot of things now. On the left is the original SVG of the Realm NFT, which was a generative map. On the right is a current snapshot from our Atlas app with a 3D model, which was upscaled by Dham, who is another core developer, and he put it through a Blender pipeline, and he generated these 3D maps from the base SVG model. So it just shows the progress of low fidelity to high fidelity. And this was a video that literally just got released about an hour ago by another person in the community called Revilo, who's upscaled it in Magic of Voxel to literally, I think it's like 16 million bricks. So you can do whatever you want with these maps. On the realms, there are 22 resources spread out different rarity, and there are traits, cities, regions, rivers, harbors, and there's 50 wonders across the 8,000 realms. If this loads, it's pretty slow. Oh, this is just a snapshot of the atlas, which we've designed, which has all the realms on it. And you can go visit it and explore them all. So that was just to give you a background of like what realms are, to give you a bit of context about what we're building. So we're really building this, we're calling it an eternal game. It might change. But what I mean by that is that, it's going to last forever on chain. Well, as long as Starknet exists, the game state will exist and it will never get reset. So that's going to come with some challenges, which I'll get to. It's in active development. It's getting closer. And if anyone from our community is listening, it's getting there, but it's been underestimated the engineering and the economic challenges building an entirely on-chain game would bring. But we're getting there. Empires rise and fall in the quest for control of resources and ancient relics within a forever world. Maintain and defend your empire, or it will fall into disarray and be consumed by enemies. Now, I was trying to explain like what Realms is. this is, an abstract way to think about the game. And when, with the rest of the slides, I guess keep this in the back of your mind. This is what we're trying to create. The game is persistent. It's fully on-chain, the game state and the logic. It's a time-based strategy game of economics and partnership. It has deep economic layers and has a built-in AMM to trade your resources. It's modular and extendable. It's open source and Creative Commons. It's governed and owned by the players, and it forms a base economic layer on which to build other experiences. So how do we get to where we are? So this is a tale of Loot and the other L2 called Arbitrum. So Loot, I'm sure everybody knows what Loot is by now. Everybody has an opinion on Loot. It's so much more than just the price of what the token is at right now. It really is just it's a open source world build. It's an idea and anyone can build on it. That's what its power is. And there's literally hundreds of people building stuff on Loot right now. It's probably one of the most active open source projects right now. And all these people are building things just because they want to build things. Realms is one of the first derivatives. And I didn't actually create the Realms contract. About a week after the Loot contract got released, Redbeard and myself, we decided to build a site called Bibliotheca, which graphed all the Loot projects together. And at that time, the day after we released it, we got in touch with the Realms dev, and he wasn't sure where he wanted to take it. So we thought, well, we didn't want to do a derivative project because there was a lot of derivative projects at the time. So we're like, we really want to build an on-chain game. And so we got in touch with him, and we kind of formed a team together, and we started building this game. And we designed this game, and we built it all on Arbitrum using the Diamond standard, if anyone's familiar with Solidity. But we fundamentally, I fundamentally, I guess, underestimated the complexity of what would take to build this game, and so I basically did the whole thing in Solidity, and I ran into all these issues. I ran into gas issues when I was trying to compute too much. To create a view function that computes too much, and so when you read something on Etherscan, that costs a little bit of gas, but Infura or the API provider pays it. But if you make it to consume too much gas, it just says no. And when you're trying to create a game, you need to create a lot of view functions that can be called by a lot of other functions. And so that just kind of broke. It just kind of broke the whole game. Then you run into function limit sizes, and then you run into cost limits due to just like the nature of the EVM, because it's it's not designed for heavy compute. It's designed for like a low powered distributed network, and just cranking up the knobs of it, just you hit a limit quite fast. And so we designed this game and we're hitting these limits, and if we're hitting the limits when we're not even doing that much, well, where are we going to go? We got no headspace. And so that was the end of October. In November, we ran a brief alpha, but realized there were some problems. And so I basically just sat on my computer for 7 days, and I realized, what are we going to do? Because I didn't want to just release this game that was just going to be a small blip. I really wanted to create something that was going to last. And so I started looking, and had my eye out on Starknet ever since I think I saw Guilty's ball engine, and so I was like, oh, I've got to revisit it. And so I revisited it, and I went down the rabbit hole. And if anyone hasn't gone down that rabbit hole, which I'm assuming most people have, as they're here, you realize just what is possible. And that was clunky back in November. But luckily, Earthworm, who I don't think he's around that much anymore, but he was the guy that wrote the Rio engine. And so I kind of dived into the Rio engine, got talking to him. He was my sensei at the beginning, and so I forked the Rio engine and started kind of designing the Realms game around it. And then I was just totally Stark build. And obviously I kept reading Guilty's contracts as inspiration. And then I quickly realized like the Starknet community is just full of these really interesting builders building crazy things, and it's almost like a filter. Cairo's, clunkiness, or not clunkiness, more just lack of tooling that kind of filtered out all the noise and just had high signal builders. And so I was totally sold. So we decided to rebuild everything from scratch, chucked out all our Solidity code, and here we are. So yeah, bye bye Sol, welcome Cairo. And we built that pyramid of knowledge. Yeah, why is it called Cairo? I don't know. I guess the Starknet dev can give us a history of that. But so yeah, I've talked about a few of these things. Starknet. We can really push the computation capacity of what's possible on chain, and the best example of that is probably Isaac right now. Well, most definitely Isaac. I mean, we are pushing some limits, but not nearly to the level of that type of physics yet. You can create significantly greater contract sizes and function sizes. It's actually, I'd probably argue, it's got much nicer composability than Solidity, like significantly once you understand namespaces and whatnot. And fundamentally, it scales much better, and it's going to provide lower costs to these heavy compute functions. So really, for on-chain gaming, it's a no-brainer. But still, storage is always going to be expensive, and compute's going to be cheap. Something to keep that in mind. But the current challenges are, it is early, tooling's a little rough, but it's developing exponentially as more developers start building libraries, and you can compose them all together. And there are no loops, but get over it. So I just thought I'd explain my current stack, because I kind of chewed a bit of glass at the beginning trying to deal with PyTests, and I hated them because they're just horribly slow. So my current stack is using Nile, and we've created a custom CLI extending Nile as a plugin, which we deploy all our stuff with. So I just built a nice few little functions where it can be like upgrade contract, and it replaces the old contract and deploys a new contract and replaces the implementation through the proxy. Then I'm using Protostar for testing, which is significantly faster than PyTest. And the current workflow is writing stateless libraries and testing with Protostar, and then after the unit tests, then write the contracts and bitpack everything where possible to save on storage. And just to reiterate this statement, compute's cheap, storage is expensive. So I would advise always thinking about this when you're writing something in Cairo. Well, anything on a distributed network. Well, we'll see if it's going to be relevant after the upgrade. But for now, it's very important to do because we're not quite sure when that's going to happen. But yeah, when sharding or tank sharding comes in, it should be significantly cheaper. Storage should be, but yeah, unknown when that's going to happen. So best to do it now. So just sort of drop a little bit of Cairo in here for why not. So, but what I mean by a stateless library is that it's just stateless. It's just a nice little library with some nice little functions that do specific things in a namespace that can be easily imported into a contract. And for testing purposes, it will speed up your writing 20x. No joke. And then running your Protostar tests, which are significantly faster as well. So writing a Protostar test is as simple as writing a Cairo function. you see here, I've created the item struct, and I've mapped some storage into it, and then I pass that into my library function, and it'll return whatever it is. And this whole test would take 5 to 10 seconds. And so you can really just test all your logic in these little functions and then compose them all together and then finally write your contract. So we can do on-chain, but should we? Since November, I've always pushed for creating this game entirely on-chain because it really is this new paradigm where it opens, it's, your contracts in your game can just be this composable open API, and other games can hook into it, and you can hook into other games if they are on-chain as well, and you can traverse these on-chain realities because you're on this same substrate. Another benefit is that you create headless games in a sense. Your multi-clients. You can create one client, but if someone thinks they can create a better client, they can go and create a better client. And perhaps that other client might become the canonical client. It creates resilience because the game, well, you have to take down the network to take down the game. It's forkable, reworkable. If people don't like the game, they can fork it, and they can change it. It's persistent. So yeah, as I said before, it will last for as long as Starknet exists. And players are entirely control of the state. The game is totally controlled by the players. So building the game, iterate. I've the amount of time that I've spent on my spreadsheet trying to work out these economics. Let's not go into that, but I think this is the last model. I think we're on the last model, but token inflation keeps me up at night. So I think it's going to keep me up at night until this game is live. Some other considerations to think about on-chain gaming is you need net negative sinks. You must burn a lot of tokens, and you must create fun ways to burn your tokens to keep your inflation in check. Otherwise, your game will inflate out of control. Automatic agents are not possible, meaning, you could, in theory, run scripts to change the game state, but I'm in the ballpark of don't do that. I want the entire game to just be totally managed by the players, and everything that a player can do will evolve the game over time, and the game will last without us having to do any input. So finally, up to what the realms game is. So in a nutshell, you settle your realm, you harvest your resources, you build buildings, you muster an army, you crush a goblin camp, you raid other realms, and you steal relics, and then you win the war. Each one of those little flames, that's a burn function, and so really, the players shouldn't know they're burning resources, or they shouldn't feel like they're burning resources. They're innate to the game, and it creates this tight economic loop where people are having fun playing the game, but the game state or the game tokens aren't growing because you need to expend them to play the game. Every resource in this game is a 1155 token. Time is the NPC, and it decays realms, what people have built. You have to maintain your happiness via buildings, and you can trade resources, and you can steal other people's resources. So how does this game designed? It's designed by this module controller architecture. There's a few reasons why we've done this. So there's a core controller, and the core controller it acts like a switchboard, which each module plugs into. And so if you want to talk from module 2 to module 1, you request the module 1 address from the module controller, and then call the module 1 function. And the controller controls the write access from each module. So one can write to two, but two can't write to three, for example. And that's all controlled by this by the module controller. And the module controller is governed by the players that are playing the game. And so they can control the path of it. Each module is actually a proxy. So it allows upgradability. But it's all still governed by the DAO, obviously. And the real benefit of doing it this way is that, this allows other developers to come along and write their own modules. And if they can propose a new module, say a world boss or a trading route module or whatever, and if the community decides, okay, this module is cool, they can vote and they'll deploy the module. The module will get added to the module controller. Or write access will get given to whichever other module needs writing, and the game expands. And so it's a totally controlled, expandable game. And the developer can choose to charge a fee into their module. And if they write a fun enough module, then they can earn for writing that module. So there are a few parameters in this game which are controlled by the House of Lords. This is still in active development, but the idea is should be clear. If anyone's played Civ, it's like similar to the world government that gets voted on every 30 turns or 50 turns or whatever it is. And so these are like base parameters in the game that can be adjusted by the players. And so this could be the day length time. So currently it's 8 hours, but it could be extended to 10, could be extended to 6. And then whatever the day length is, that will determine the resource rate. The vault length time, the resource accrual rate, taxation, the cost of goods, the base building grid. And this is all voted on by the settled realms, which are the players. Now, on each realm, you can build buildings, but there's a spatial grid. And so this spatial grid is determined by your cities and regions. And so, and you can see here, it just creates a buildable square meter. And so you really have to choose what building you want to build. Now you do have a great city planner. So, if they can build the castle in any size that it sees fit. You don't have to have a 5x5 square available. It could be a 1 by 25. Each of these buildings affect your happiness and your other coefficient factors, and so it really makes you really need to think about which ones you build. But the really interesting thing about the buildings is that they actually decay over time. And so what I was talking about before about time, it's what we push through this game, and it's really what determines the game state. And so instead of like building one building, you basically build the time of a building. And over, say a day, a castle might decay by 10%. So after 10 days, your castle basically will cease to exist, and you have to rebuild that castle. And so it creates this like permanent, like a semi-permanence to the game, because with a persistent game, we just can't have one castle last for a year, right? It needs to, we want this game to evolve, and people that are engaged to play, be able to play and new people have a chance to play. And so, this is really one of the factors of running it on chain, is that you do have this persistent timestamp type feature that you can bake into your gameplay. So I'm really, really excited about this. So I did do a tweet the other day, time as an NPC, but I only got like 2 likes. I guess people thought it was a bit too abstract, but time really is the non-player character in on-chain games. The way I see it. And so this is a little bit of an abstract chart, but I hope you get the idea. Like we've got on-chain over game length. And game length is just, persistent or minutes, and on-chain 0 to 100%. So, Isaac, Dark Forest, Conquest Realms were all 100% on-chain. Persistent, Conquest Realms were persistent. Isaac has a time limit in its worlds, and Dark Forest has a, cycle. So in a sense, it's ephemeral, but it's persistent. Oh. So when we have a level of combat in this game, and this is all on chain too, and so it's not turn-based just yet. It's really just one attack simulation by raiders. But the way we've done it is that we've packed nine tier 1, 5 tier 2, 1 tier 3 troops into one felt. And so this is where bit mapping really comes in handy, because if you're updating the state of 15 different units on every battle, well, you'd be updating 15 times 2 because you're fighting someone else. That's going to cost you a lot. And so this is where bit mapping really comes in. I'm sure there could, I don't know if any other anyone's talked about bit mapping in any of the previous Starknet houses, but it's probably a good subject for someone to cover, but I'm not covering it here. And so this strategy involves building up an army with these troops, which all have different statistics, so attack, defense, wisdom, fatality, agility, and then raiding other realms. And according to their statistics, you might counter their troops, or they might counter you. And so you really have to think about your unit composition. And so the metagame will evolve around this. And if you're successful, you'll raid the other realm vault of their resources. And so this is all defined in the contract called combat.cairo, or L06 combat.cairo, if you want to go check out our repo. And there's a whole combat library which we're trying to make as generalized as possible for other people to use. And the lord behind a lot of this code is Milan Cermak. So I'll go and follow him on Twitter, and I'll just chat to him on Discord. He's a great guy. He's a great developer. Now, how does the simulation actually work? Well, there's a dice roll, which is a random number. It's kind of a pseudo random right now, but we'll move it to a full random in production. And it works by cycling through the troops. So tier 1 will attack tier 2. Tier 1 will attack tier 1, and up, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until they're all dead, and then it'll go work its way up to tier 3, and it'll eventually be tier 3 versus tier 3 if there are none left. So there are different troop types. And so on basically every attack, there's a dice roll that happens, and the hit points gets calculated according to like the attack and defense and the agility and the wisdom. And then that will cause the damage of the fatality of the unit. And then the unit will die, and then the unit's dead forever. Just a little bit of Cairo, but probably not enough reference here to make sense. And so also in the game, there's a AMM, which is in our repo, which everyone can check out. But it's a 1155 to 20, so 20 to 1155 AMM, which means that you can trade n number of resources with the ERC20 token at once. So you can trade up to 10 resources at once with it. And it's inspired by Nifty Swap, which if anybody knows, it's a Solidity-based AMM. It's a pretty interesting contract. It's in active development, and it's in review at the moment. It could definitely be iterated on, but it works well. This is actually live running on our alpha. Yeah, so this is the thing that keeps me up at night, is the demand for all these resources and keeping it balanced across a complex economy. I've been very inspired by EVE Online. I think that's probably, if you're designing a game that has a complex economics, that's the game to look at. It is insane. So yeah, what comes next? After this game, well, we haven't launched it yet, but we are building a RPG based around the loot items, and this will be there'll be soulbound tokens to a sense. There might not be tokens; they're just going to be soulbound to your wallet. But you'll be able to spawn an adventurer, and on this adventurer, you'll be able to equip 8 items, which will be loot items. These adventurers will die, but these loot items will evolve over time, and they'll change state, and they'll get more powerful, and you'll be able to fuse them together and whatnot. This, if anybody's interested in this, this is the branch that it's on, and it's in active development right now. So if any RPG nerds out there and Cairo nerds, this is a pretty interesting project to get involved in, and it's all open source. So yes, so jump into Discord and just fork the contract and do whatever you want. And if you want to find me, I'm at Twitter, or jump into our Discord, or I'm in the Topology Discord, I'm in the Matchbox Discord, I'm in a few Discords. So yeah, that's everything. How did I go for time there? But yeah, we can have some questions now. Anybody that's curious about any of that?
Well, surely I have questions, but I think we can move on to other presenters, and we can perhaps do the Q&A at the end. Yeah.
Sure.
Awesome presentation. Well, I think next up is the briq bros. Okay, the briq team is preparing their presentation, getting set up with the webcam. So I have a question for LootRealms while the preparation is going. I was wondering if it is possible to bootstrap the economy and the mechanics with lower complexity, and then you grow that complexity over time, as in, less kinds of resources to manage, less kinds of combat unit, economy units, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there is, but in the nature of what the realms are, I'm constrained to their design, unfortunately. So I have to create the economy around the current resources. So I think I've come up with a solution in terms of the economics of it. Created a demand structure for it. But yeah, I think the key is really keeping the keeping the burn kind of loop tight, so it doesn't become too much of something. And I think the rest kind of balances itself out. I think if there's just too much getting emitted, and not enough getting captured, but there's a limit on how much can accrue on your realm, so you can't just wait a week and then claim. I think currently it's set at 3 days of resources, so you have to keep being engaged. And of course, yeah, you can go and sell them on the AMM. But yeah, that's the nature of a totally liquid economy, right? Is that people can sell things, and I don't want to restrict that. I guess as a game designer, we got to figure out, convince people to play the game and spend those resources. But yeah, that I in terms of complexity, I've thought about it a lot when doing the spreadsheets. But yeah, it is what it is.
Great. Well, I have a lot more questions, but I think the briq team is ready, so let's move on with the presentation.
Sure.
Yep. Sylve and Lancelot, Mike's is on your side now. Hello, Sylve. I see. Oh, there's unexpected finicky tech at the WeWork. Yeah, so do you think we can let the aspect team speak first? Okay, Sean, you're up. Let's talk about starknet.js or NFT marketplaces. Yep.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Okay, let me just share my screen. Okay. Hold on. I think I shared the wrong screen. Oh, no, it's fine. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I'm gonna be sort of combining two presentations I made before about StarkNet.js, and then I think I'm gonna first go sort of overview about what StarkNet is trying to solve. And I think a good place to start is like what are like some of the challenges in blockchains in general. And so I just want to confirm, like, are you guys seeing like the blockchain trilemma? Is that the slide that everyone can see right now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so yeah, typically blockchains have to make the following trade-offs, right? Being scalable, being decentralized, and being secure. And typically with well, the most valuable blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they've sort of taken decentralized and security over scalability. And I think that kind of makes sense because like if you're trying to be a store of value or you're trying to have value on the internet, you probably want something that's decentralized so that no single entity could take the funds away from you, and also something that's extremely secure, right? If some part of the blockchain gets compromised, it's only limited to maybe on the individual wallet level and not the entire chain gets compromised. Obviously, if you take that sort of trade-off, um, you're not going to be as scalable, right? So when you make a transaction with Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's going to be quite expensive. And because of this, for example, if you run a smart contract code by doing some action with DeFi or buying NFTs, there's always these gas wars, right? And during high traffic times, that could be like $50 to even sometimes $200 in gas fees, right? And that sort of really hurts adoption. Obviously, if you're a whale and you're doing very, very big numbers of very big numbers in terms of your transaction, that doesn't matter as much. But if you're playing a game, for example, and you want to do like a $5 transaction, it's not going to make sense when you're paying much more in transaction fees. So I think, yeah, so typical blockchains are decentralized and secure. And I think Starknet sort of tries to solve that scalability issue. And sort of how Starknet works is people like the users send transactions and developers build smart contract applications on Starknet. And then the Starknet prover generates a proof, and that proof gets sent to Ethereum layer 1. And the Starknet layer is sort of the layer 2 blockchain, right? And then Ethereum will verify if the proof is correct. And so it sort of like inherits the security property of Ethereum, because at the end of the day, Ethereum is still the source of truth, and Ethereum is still verifying all the proofs that are sent from the layer 2. So basically, when it generates a proof, it's sort of like batching a lot of transactions together. So you can sort of think of it as like when you zip a bunch of files and create like a single smaller file. When you do a zip, right? So sort of in sort of the same analogy, Starknet is batching all of these transactions into a cryptographic proof to be sent on Ethereum, and then Ethereum ultimately verifies that proof. And then the size of the proof is much smaller than like the information of all these transactions on Starknet. So you sort of get up to like 100x in transaction fee savings because you're batching all these transactions into a proof. Okay, cool. So what is starknet.js, right? So starknet.js is the library that allows like front-end JavaScript to communicate to the layer 2 network. And that's typically like mobile apps if it's in React Native, and obviously web apps if it's in React. So yeah, so if you have a JavaScript application, it allows you to sort of interact with the Starknet network and do things like, send transactions, call smart contract functions on Starknet, and etc. So now I'm gonna go to my other presentation that goes a bit more in depth about Starknet.js, the library itself. So yeah, so can you guys see what is Starknet.js? Is that sort of what everyone's seeing right now? Okay, cool. So what is Starknet.js, right? Like I mentioned, it allows apps to talk to the Starknet network, and we sort of follow the ethers.js architecture, just because like, even though there's web3.js and ethers.js on Ethereum, there's much more, we're seeing much more recent adoption of ethers.js, and it has a really clean API, and I think it makes the sort of right abstractions on the different parts of talking to the network. So our primary APIs are like the providers, the account, the signer, and the contract. And sort of the provider is like the primary way the library talks to the Starknet network, right? Like these are things like reading data from the blockchain. And yeah, so that's sort of the primary thing the provider does, is like getting the data from the blockchain. And then the other interfaces sort of allow you to more to interact more in a different way, like writing transactions, so changing the state of the blockchain. So that's sort of what the account API does. So it extends the provider, and it allows, it adds a signer to it, so it can interact with the network in terms of like having your account like sign transactions onto the Starknet network. So if you want to change the state of the network through your account, you would be using the account API. And also like the signer API allows you to sign different kinds of transactions. So like there will be different implementations of the signer depending on the type of wallet, right? Like if you have a hardware wallet, for example, you might have your own signer because the signer has to interact with the hardware in some way that's different than a signer that's Argent-X or Bravos, for example. And then you have the contract API that allows you to, talk to contracts. For example, if you want to call like a mint function when you have a ERC20 contract, you would use the contract API to call those functions on the Starknet network. Yeah, so now I'm gonna like demo a very simple account and ERC20 example where you kind of create a account and also create an ERC20 contract, and then you transfer some funds to your account. Okay, cool. Yeah, so just to go over this very quickly. So right now we have a compiled Argent account, and we also have a compiled ERC20 contract. And then we generate the public and private key, and then we deploy the Argent smart contract. I think it's good to sort of mention that accounts like accounts in Starknet are contracts as well through account abstraction. We had a talk previously with Topology. Julian and the Bravos team sort of explained sort of why the benefits of having account abstraction. So I think they're really good resources if you want to learn more about this. And this is sort of the account in action. We have the compiled Argent contract, and then we're deploying that contract to the network. So we gotta wait for that account contract to be deployed, and then because the account contract is also a contract, right? So we sort of create a new contract, and then when it's deployed, we get the response address, and then we set it as our contract object here. And then we need to, initialize the Argent account, right, with our public key. And then we create a new account with our initialized account that we just deployed. And then the next thing is we'll deploy the ERC20 contract, which is like a lot of the tokens follow the ERC20 standard, right? So let's deploy a ERC20 contract, and then we gotta wait for the transaction to complete. And then we create a new contract, and then we have that ERC20 object. ERC20 object as our contract. And then now we can sort of call the mint function from our ERC20 contract, and then we mint it to our account that we just created previously. We wait for the transaction, and then we verify that the account that we just deployed has a balance of 1,000, right? The amount that we just minted. And then through our account, we could also execute a function where we transfer tokens back to the ERC20 contract. And then here we specify a fee. I think I might need to update this a little bit, because I think now the fee is actually required to be non-zero. So right after the call, I'll update this really quickly, but all of this code should be on GitHub. And then we'll wait for the transaction to complete our transfer, and then we'll check the balance of the ERC20 contract, and the balance should be 10, right? The number that we just transferred. So all of these are in console log. So if you run node index.js in this repository, you should see the entire flow of creating a account and also having a ERC20 contract, and then getting some tokens from the account. Yeah, I think that's it. That's sort of a very basic demo of how to use Starknet.js, and I hope you guys, explore and build something cool with it. Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful. Again, let's do the Q&A at the end, and let's get the briq presentation going. Yeah, feel free to start anytime, Sylve and Hazlet.
Hey folks, can you hear us?
Yep, perfect.
Lovely, lovely. Okay, very much sorry for all the delay. It's been a bit of an issue. So we are over here in Paris with the other members of the Starknet House. So nice to meet you all. I'm Sylve. I'm the co-founder of briq, which is an NFT building protocol that we built on Starknet. So in order to spice things up a little bit, I will be a bit less technical than what Sean and Love have already shown you. I'll be going through exactly what we've built with briq, and I'm also joined by Lancelot, who's the actual IQ part of briq, in case you folks have any question regarding the technicals of how we exactly built briq and how the contracts work.
Sorry, just to interrupt very quickly, can you turn off your background and show us what's happening in Paris at the moment?
Let me do that. How can I turn off the choose the filter? Okay, no filter. Yep. Hey folks, say hi. Hello. So some of them were actually stuck at the entrance, and Lancelot had to get them.
Right. I think it would be great to do a quick round of intros, just for people attending the physical event. Yeah.
Absolutely. Perfect. So I'll be sharing my screen quickly. Can you folks see my screen?
Yeah.
Good. All right. So you might know us from Twitter. So Sylve and Lancelot, we've known each other for 10 years, and we just recently decided to start fucking shit up on Starknet. So what is briq? The best way I can explain to you what briq is by telling you the weirdest thing that you could hear about an NFT, and it's that you might hear that it's a copyright, that it's a decentralized ownership protocol built on the blockchain. The easiest way to understand what an NFT is to think that it's an object. Think of an NFT as a physical object, but held digitally. You have all the characteristics of the physical item. You can use them whenever you want. You can use a pen and put it in your ear if you want. You can use them outside of a given context. You can sell them, you can trade them, you can collateralize them, and you can also break them or lose them, which is not exactly something that you could do with a digital item. So with this knowledge, NFTs are objects. It makes a lot more sense when you start thinking about the different NFTs that exist in the ecosystem. Why are people buying 300,000 paintings as NFTs? Because people have bought $300,000 paintings in the past. It makes sense to do it with NFTs. Sorare cards or Axie cards is exactly like buying football cards or Pokemon cards. It's the same thing. Just think of them as objects. And when you have this mindset, it makes a lot more sense to understand exactly how it works. So armed with this knowledge, we figured, okay, there's this problem with NFTs, this sort of holy grail, which is to have NFTs being highly interoperable. So you have this NFT, then you can bring it over to that one universe, and it flows seamlessly, and you can compose them with other NFTs. And it's not something that you have been able to do so far. So we sat down and we said, okay, NFTs are objects, and there's this problem. Is there an object in the physical sense that will allow you to actually build stuff and compose them easily? And it turns out, yes, that's a building block. That's Legos. So we thought, hey, has anyone actually tried to build an NFT protocol that revolves around that one principle of building blocks? That's what we've done. We actually rebuilt a construction system running entirely on chain. And that's what briq is. It's an NFT composability protocol that revolves around these teeny tiny particles that we call briqs. So briqs are 1155 tokens. They've got different materials, and they're represented as a voxel, so a 3D pixel. It's exactly like a cube if you've played Minecraft. They have one special property, which is that you're able to assemble them into a single NFT. Once you do this, you're assembling a construction. That construction is made out of X number of bricks. And if you get bored with your construction, you can always choose to disassemble it, get the bricks back, and build something new. So this is so far what the interface looks like. So you're able to actually use a front-end interface that we've built, build anything you want. Then once you mint it, this thing will actually consume some of the bricks that you own and store this construction on chain. And this is not something we very quickly realized, like Love, that this was not something that we could run on a normal L1 or even a normal L2. The issue being that NFT minting is already costly, as Sean said. But once you start adding more logic, once you say, okay, you actually need to have that many NFTs in your wallet to mint something, or even have construction rules saying, okay, you can only build this construction, but that construction has to follow this set of constraints, like only being on one plane, have a maximum of 10 bricks, be symmetrical. This is something that you can run on L1, but it's just absolutely expensive. So that's why we decided to build it on Starknet. So to give you an idea, these are different constructions that have been built by the community, and every single block that you see in these pictures is actually a token that is represented on chain. So we've shown you, if you look at the bottom half, you can see Revilo building a Realms Wonder. So he actually decided to build with bricks the representation of one of the elements of the Realms ecosystem, which is Love's game. So the way it works is actually pretty simple. You have two main contracts. The one is the briq contract and the other one is the SEC contract. The briq contract is a 1155 compliant type of contract that is able to call the SEC contract and is the one that actually manages the 721s. We've got a few more bells and whistles. Feel free to ask some more questions in the end. The important part to understand is that we're interpreting these bricks as voxel through the briq builder. We're giving you one gateway to these contracts. That's what Love was referring to. He said that you get these, you're building an interface on top of the contract, but that's just one interface. You could choose them to interpret them differently. That's exactly what we're doing here. And in order to help integration with other marketplaces, what we've built is an API that will actually allow you to export the different files, the different construction that you've made into different file formats. And that's what marketplaces like Aspect, Sean's Aspect, is actually leveraging to showcase your NFTs directly on the marketplace. So let's say you've built a house with bricks, we're going to give you the Vox file, a GLB file, different type of files that you could actually use to integrate into another metaverse or another game. So we were actually the first project to be deployed on Starknet mainnet. So that was, we initially started working on this in November 21, which was probably at the same time as Loaf and Gyoza. We decided to push for mainnet deployment in the end of December. And ever since, we've been the biggest project that is currently live on the Starknet testnet ever since. Which actually caused some issues. When we deployed on mainnet in December, Starknet was actually footing the bill for the transaction costs, and we actually got a lot of usage from just people being curious on Starknet, and that cost them around like 40-60K total before we actually turned off the mainnet contract. So yeah, kids, don't go on testnet first. Just go on testnet first. That's just safer. Some numbers so far, we have, well, I should actually update these numbers. We have more than 100,000 NFTs that have been built by users, meaning that people have claimed bricks, actually stacked them up on the user interface, and we have more than 100,000 of them. You can actually look at all of them on Aspect. And we have, right now, it's like 85,000 unique owners of NFTs. So to be taken with a grain of salt, it's a bit difficult to track unique users on the blockchain, but that's, yeah, unique addresses. So what's next? What we aim to do is actually expanding the protocol. Think of bricks as like NFT matter, and we do want people to actually use these bricks to different usage. So in the future, what we'll be doing is using Validium for storage. As Lo said, compute is cheap, storage is expensive. So we want to leverage this to the maximum. So stay away from storage as much as you can. We want to go back on mainnet and this time not crash Starknet. So we'll do that in September. And we'll continue integrating with the overall Starknet gaming ecosystem. So we're working with Loaf, we're working with Dope Wars, and all the different games to actually have bricks as some sort of building blocks that could be integrated into the game. So let's say you want to build a castle, that castle could be actually built out of bricks and integrated back into realms, for instance. And yeah, open on to contributions through Only Dust if you folks want to take a look at the different contracts that we have. And yeah, that's about it. Any questions?
Yeah. So which Validium solution are you going to be using?
Directly on Starknet, the Validium one.
So they have their own solution?
Yeah.
It's documented somewhere? Or?
They're working on it. It's implemented on StarkX, but it's not available yet on Starknet. And we've been bugging the StarkWare team to actually release it.
But it will be, I mean, would it be decentralized too as a solution or completely centralized to store the metadata? You
will have what is called a data availability council, I think committee, that's how they call it on StarkX. And it's, you get a bunch of people getting together saying, okay, we're going to manage this data all together. So it's less expensive than L1 powered storage, but it's also a lot less, well, it's less secure, but it's also less expensive. So it's a bit of a trade-off. There are, and we do believe that volition, the ability to choose between L1 and L2 secured storage, is a great tool because currently you just don't have a choice. It's either you store nothing on chain or you store absolutely everything on chain. And we do believe that there's a place for a middle ground. For bricks, the fact that, for instance, a construction has a certain amount of bricks, that is an information that is very valuable. You do need to know which bricks are stored inside the construction. The actual metadata of which brick is placed where is less sensitive. This is something that you could reconstruct even from cold data.
So how would it take place? Like two different contracts deployed on different, so one on Validium, the other one on Zero, or it's inside the same contract, you say this data go.
I think this is how it's going to work. Yeah.
It's good. Yeah, it's powerful.
There is no documentation just yet on how it's going to work on Starknet, but to my understanding, this is more of a choice that you have to make, and therefore this is a choice that you can percolate down to the end user. We could even have them choose: do you want this stored through on L2 or on L1? This is something that we could offer as an option.
Like directly in code with decorators on.
Yeah, directly through the interface. Like, okay, you want this L1, L2. Okay, it's going to cost you like an hour and a half. I'm willing to pay that and have it secured on L1.
And okay, interesting. And for the choice of Validiums, also, will you be able to choose between different Validium solutions if you don't trust and want to?
From as far as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, Lancelot, this is something at like the protocol level. Therefore, if you choose, the one thing that we do want to have with storage is the ability to say, let's say you've got a Bored Ape right now. The information about the Bored Ape, the exact metadata, is not stored on chain. Therefore, you cannot build a contract that says, okay, it's only accessible, you can only mint this NFT if you have the golden ape, because that one information, the golden ape, is not stored on chain. Therefore, if we're to use another storage solution that is not StarkWare native, such as Arweave or something else, this is not an information that we can leverage. This is why we want to use Validium, because this information, yeah, that's actually a very good point. Thanks for bringing it up. The storage information, even though it's L1 only, is still usable by smart contracts.
Yeah.
So
that's a big difference.
Exactly. So for us, the exact description of a brick NFT of a set is very simple. It's which brick is stored where, with which material and which color. So it's a lot of information, but it's still relatively cheap to store directly through Validium. So you could have something that says, okay, if you have a construction that has at least 100 bricks, do this. If it's only made out of gold bricks, do this. If it's only red, do that.
So we could imagine like in the same code, you would have data on IPFS, on Validium, and directly on L2, and yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the timeline,
For Validium, we don't have like a good estimate right now. It's still a bit in the air.
Maybe another question.
Yep.
For the moment, users are using Matchbox only, sorry, not Matchbox, briq, only to have fun and to try the Starknet and everything. But at the end, what will be the main use case of briq?
Yeah. Can you folks actually hear the questions when the like online? Can you hear all the questions?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Currently, the main use case for briq is to think of it as like Play-Doh or actual Legos. It's like the main use case for these things is just to build stuff with it.
Okay.
So that is always going to be the goal for briq, is to help you build something that you own, like down to the atomic particles. The usage for this is going to be to have, it's a bit like a pet. When you have your, like the Petaverse ecosystem, it's like you have your pet and you can bring it over to different metaverses. It's the same thing for us. Let's say you build like a little character, you will be able to carry it around into different games, different universes.
Okay, so the goal is to integrate like the artwork of briq in other metaverses.
Yep. Someone is asking, how do we import .obj, .stl, .3dm format 3D models to briq? You can import .vox and .obj, I think. No, not .obj yet. You've got actually converters online. We haven't coded that just yet, but you can actually bring in .vox files directly into the builder. Second question, with Validium, often storage, where is the storage? Is it a centralized database like SQL? To be honest with you, I'm not too sure how that thing works out. So gotta check the docs when it actually is released. I think it's stored not necessarily as like a very centralized database. There's like a bunch of people who actually control it. But yeah, that could be the case of it.
I have another question on the business model. So let's say I'm a game developer. I'm interested in building with the briq. Will I have to pay for the briq? Yeah. So my point is, with the system, maybe the incentive will be, okay, I just fork the contract and do my own, and I'm not. It's really hard to encourage builders to choose your format because
that's a very, very good point. The way we're approaching this, and it's a general problem for NFT projects, and there are only two groups of people that are incentivized to provide any utility to an NFT project. They're the NFT holders and the NFT issuers. And that's the reason like no one has been reusing the axes or the CryptoKitties, because why the fuck would I do that? Like, I'm not financially incentivized to do this. The way we think about solving this problem is by actually giving a portion of the briq supply to game developers. Why would you build with briq? Because you actually have an incentive to build with briq. So that could work at like, we give you just general briq, but also branded briq. And this is a supply that you, as a game developer, would control.
So the briq supply is limited?
No.
So you give a part of the supply which is unlimited?
It's a bit like Lego. Like Lego bricks are scarce, but they're not limited in numbers.
Yeah.
It's the same thing for us.
Okay.
Any other question, folks, online?
I think there's a question in the chat. Sorry.
Sorry, I had a question. You mentioned that briqs are scarce but not limited. Could you expand on that? So does that mean like there's going to be, because it's a bit contradictory, right? Like if they're scarce, that means they have to be limited. So just trying to understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, that might just be like badly translating something. We don't aim at limiting the briq supply overall. That's just not a goal. What we do aim at having is having also different materials of bricks with different levels of rarity. So we do want to have, like, at the very least, a very common brick that everyone can use. That's something that's very cheap. But at the other end of the spectrum, something that is more, that is rarer. And therefore, you could only have in certain constructions or with certain games.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
And even these like branded bricks will be limited.
Yeah, if you do, I mean, if you're a game and you want to tank your supply, like,
Yeah.
feel free to do it. Other question, can anyone mint or create any type of bricks? Currently, no. And this is something that we'll be working on decentralizing in the future, like having a DAO that would say, okay, we choose to allocate a portion of bricks to such or such games.
Do you plan on having an engine working with mobile, like, for example, Unity or
yeah, if you've tried, like, building anything on mobile with blockchain, you will, or on desktop, you will know that it's an absolute nightmare. So not in the medium term, until we do have wallet solutions for this. Yeah, well, LordOfAFew just said when was them, and that, yeah, that's the spirit. If you're like into building games, the quirks of blockchain make it so that wallet connectivity and such encourage you to stay inside the browser, and that just makes sense. If you try to go into an app on mobile, you're going to have issues with signing messages. You're going to have issues querying information or sending information to the blockchain. And even if you manage to overcome all these hurdles, you're going to get completely slapped by, like, the policies of either Apple or Android. So it's a bit of a mess. Yeah, soon on the Solana mobile phone. It takes you 4 days to get a text message. A question, is there an example of a Starknet metaverse where we could import any briq NFT? We're actively working on this, so stay tuned for more. But there are not a lot of metaverses currently, but we're working on with not necessarily Starknet native metaverses to integrate bricks into. Yeah, reached out to Altzone, waiting for them to to come back to us. All right, anything else, folks? Yeah, exactly, Loaf. Soon in the realms verse. Right, logging off. Cheers, folks.
Well, so I have a question for actually LootRealms. Yeah, so I think the idea is that that we're building towards these worlds with complex mechanics, and it's not a linear process. And so, have you considered sort of the mechanism for resetting and sort of relaunching these worlds with different mechanics, and if there is a sort of a nonlinear path of, you know, resetting and relaunching worlds with increasing complexity, then how do you deal with a sense of continuity, as in, you know, people who have built and achieved records in the past universes, how do you represent that in the future universes?
Yeah. So in terms of, like, resetting, like, I think that the current plan is to, you know, have these parameters that can be adjusted via via voting, and these parameters basically change the world state. So, like, you know, the length of the day and some of the other things that I explained. And, you know, as you said, like, you know, how do you keep persistence? But, like, how do you keep progression in a persistent game? But, you know, not not weigh too heavily on OGs, because if OGs are too powerful, then no one can actually play the game. Like, you can't get new people, right? So that's why I'm kind of leaning towards pushing time as the the NPC that adjusts stuff. So it will decay buildings faster, perhaps. But perhaps there's a there is a level of permanence as well in each realm, being that there'll still be a record of how many castles ever got built on that realm, and perhaps that plays a minor role in the in how that realm operates, but it's not like so heavily weighted. So there's that's kind of like the realm level scope. But in terms of like player specific stuff, I'm kind of edging into the idea of kind of like player skill trees, where like I think soulbound tokens kind of get misconstrued, like construed around things. Like, I'm not like you need to create a record on people's wallets somehow, and I think skill trees where people get rewarded for points for doing specific things in the game is an interesting way to do it. So, like, say if you get a successful raid, you get a skill tree in that your combat. You get a skill point in your combat tree, right? And then that just keeps accruing. And now that might not give you, a deep gameplay perk, but it will give you like a sense of permanence and a sense of credibility continuing into the next game state, for example. And then, perhaps there's a gated area which only people that have 100 more, confirmed raids that can actually access. So that literally the only way to get that is by actually playing the game. But it's not really, I think I'm trying to not make any actions too powerful for OGs, because, we want this game to keep going and more people to come in. So that's kind of the approach that I'm taking. But yeah, in terms of the world reset, we debated this a lot, and there might be a thing in the future, but I think the path that I'm going to tread now is this level of this decay and this like half ephemeral, half persistent world.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, how having a good chance to ask you. I mean, how are you treating Isaac? I see you can reset the worlds. Is that based on a time limit, or like, or that just evolve over time, and people can choose to create their own worlds with their own parameters? And like, is there a level of persistence that travels through those worlds?
I think that's an ongoing design. That's I think that it will be good for us to take this offline. I think
Sure.
and yeah,
Sure.
but sure, certainly this is a very important question.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so I think this is the end of the session today. Thank you, everyone. We're packing 3 heavyweight projects into one session. There's a lot to review. I myself will rewatch the recording. I'm sure you guys will be interested in rewatching. And yeah, see you in the buildings. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys, Gian.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers, folks.